what really grinds my gears?
So it's Christmas, and of course, I'm not a big fan of Christmas. I think Christmas is a farce. You know, you think about it. This is the Christmas special, by the way, so enjoy the Christmas special, everyone. I love Christmas. I love Christmas because it gives me an opportunity to vent. You know, the only thing I love about Christmas is the time off work, the time where you can just vent. You know, you can just deal with all your stuff. But here's why I don't like Christmas. It's because it's a lie. Christmas is nothing to do with Jesus' birth. In fact, there's nowhere in any history or the Bible that says that Jesus was born in December. In fact, quite the opposite. In the Bible, it says that when Jesus was born, the farmers were out watching their flocks, watching the sheep. And in that time and in that part of the world, it'd be way too cold in December to be out watching sheep. In fact, the sheep were not outside because it was so cold in December in that part of the world. So that's all a myth. December was selected by the Romans. The Romans chose December as the time to celebrate Christmas. They decided that Jesus' birthday was going to be celebrated in December because it fitted in nicely with their other festivals, like Saturnalia. And what we celebrate as Christmas today is actually just what the Romans celebrated as Saturnalia. And it was basically the winter solstice, the end of the season, the end of the harvest. And it's not worshipping Jesus as a god. It's worshipping the Roman god Saturn. Saturnalia is the name of the festival. So we are not celebrating anything that has anything to do with Jesus Christ. We're celebrating something to do with the god of Saturn, the Roman god. So it's a complete mismatch. So don't like Christmas because it's a total false birthday. It's nobody's birthday on the 25th of December. It's not Jesus' birthday. It's likely Jesus was born in a warmer month. And there is no evidence for when Jesus was born. So we call it Christmas, and it has absolutely nothing to do with him. The only holiday we can truly celebrate is Easter, which isn't really much of a celebration because it's, you know, the resurrection of the death. You know, really it's quite a tragedy and like a bad thing that we're kind of trying to celebrate in Easter. You know, it's like, oh, well done everyone, we killed him, brilliant. And he, you know, it's not a great holiday. It's all very sad, and Christmas is sad. It's a fake birthday for Jesus. It shouldn't be celebrated. It was good in the Roman days though, because when they celebrated Saturnalia, what happened was the masters had to serve the peasants. And, you know, people were allowed to get drunk in the streets. And basically, the Romans created Saturnalia as an organised chaos holiday. They decided that for this amount of time, people were allowed to go a bit mental. And that's what the celebration was. So, that's essentially where Christmas comes from. You know, the eating, the feasting, the drinking, the alcohol, all the extras, the decorating, and that's nothing to do with Jesus. And then you got like Santa Claus, which is like nothing to do with religion or anything holy. You know, it's just a load of. It's like it took Saint Nicholas, who was a guy who literally went around giving coal to old people, and turned it into a guy who's like enslaved elves. You know, he's enslaved elves and makes them make toys. He's basically China. You know, Santa Claus is China. Makes all the toys, makes everything, and then like sends it on a plane. It's like Amazon delivery. Amazon Prime is like Santa Claus. So, Merry Christmas, everybody, and have a wonderful New Year. And this is just the beginning of my Christmas rants. But yeah, just setting the stage that Christmas is like a fake holiday, nothing to do with like Jesus. Even if you're not religious, it's important you know this, that it's absolutely nothing to do with the Bible, nothing to do with Jesus. It's a Roman chosen holiday. In fact, the Romans, the Roman Catholics, the Romans, they didn't even assert the Bible till 400 years after Jesus had died. There was early Christians way back when, and they didn't follow the Old Testament, the original. I can't remember the name of these Christians, but they didn't follow the Old Testament. They just followed the New Testament. In fact, not all the New Testament. They rejected a lot of it. And then, that was the early days. But the Romans took charge of Christianity. The Roman leaders decided that they would organise Christianity. And they did it in a way to please the Jews as well at the time, because that's why they inserted the Old Testament. The Old Testament in the Bible is Jewish scripture, all of it. And then the New Testament is the stories of Jesus. And this has all been put together, and now in the modern day, there's not a singular Christianity group that rejects the Old Testament, even though the Old Testament has absolutely nothing to do with Christ. So how is it Christianity? It's nothing to do with it. And yet Christians don't talk about this, ever. It has, in my view, the Old Testament, what makes Jesus look bad, because by association, the New Testament looks bad. You know, the Old Testament talks about how the earth was made in 7 days and things that we know are like not true, you know. And it talks a lot about slavery in the Old Testament and this really judgmental God that will strike you down and all this. And it's actually nothing to do with what Jesus tried to teach. You see? So you basically got this fake holiday that's nothing to do with Jesus. And then Christians are kind of like not really concentrating on Jesus's beliefs. And the Romans took over Christianity and they put in all the Jewish scriptures into the Old Testament. And Christianity gets ridiculed by atheists and other religions like the Muslims and whatnot because of the association with the Jewish scriptures, the Old Testament. You know, Christianity should just be the New Testament. Just Jesus stories. You know, take that. What's wrong with that? But no, it's got to have the Old Testament always involved. And that the Old Testament's full of, you know, Adam and Eve, for instance, Noah's Ark, these sort of stories that are just kind of like, don't make a lot of sense, you know? They seem like they discredit the teachings and the philosophy of Jesus, you know? At the end of the day, whether you believe Jesus was like, had powers and whatnot, it's the philosophy of the man that's very important of, you know, you help people, you treat people as you want to be treated, you know? You challenge authority. Because Jesus would challenge the authority. This is what he'd do. But he would do it politely. He wouldn't do it with force. He would do it with words. You know, holding people accountable. And Christianity and Christmas, both, don't focus on Jesus. And it's all just a big joke. So Merry Christmas, everybody. And I've really enjoyed talking about this. I feel better now. Let me just have a little sip of piss there. So the Romans have literally ruined everything. But also, they're the reason we're not all living in caves still. Unfortunately, they were like, you talk about the British Empire having like the most coverage. The Romans had the most influence because they literally made Christianity, they organized it, and also sabotaged it. They've sabotaged it, guys. Christianity's lost all of its sparkle because of the hierarchical power structure that Christianity has with the Pope and, the high priests and all this. They're a bunch of false prophets, They've got nothing to do with the Bible. There's nowhere in the Bible, nowhere in the New Testament, nowhere in the Bible that says these guys that are Romans are in charge. The Romans are who got Jesus crucified. The Romans the Jews got him crucified, but the Romans did it. The Romans carried the order. So the guys who carried the order to have Jesus crucified are the ones who edited the Bible and then organized the religion. You don't see there's a problem there. These are all facts. You can chat GPT it. So, in other words, we've got this holiday that's all Roman based. It's a Roman holiday. Christianity was a Roman religion, and they included a lot of Jewish scriptures and things like that. And it's not all focused on Jesus. Most of it's not. The New Testament's very small, the Old Testament's big. But they're just smudged together. Like they're all the same thing, and they're not. And then you got the royal family, for instance, around Europe. All these royal families around Europe, the monarchies, the non-government, all of these guys are literally because of the Romans as well. All the monarchies began with the Romans. That's where the lineage started. There's a Roman ideology, the monarchy. So this is where it all comes from. This divine right to rule. It's all a load of nonsense that comes from the Roman gods. Yeah, not Christ. It comes from the Roman gods. You're believing in Roman god stuff. Royal family, Roman god stuff. Nothing to do with Jesus. We're basically still following literally the Roman Empire still stands with these royal families and things, especially the British one. But the royal families around Europe, it's all from the Roman age. It's all gone from then. Nothing to do with Christ. That's why they're called Roman Catholics. Because Rome organized it. Corrupt. They corrupted it. They mixed it in with Jewish scriptures. They probably edited the Bible to make Jesus look like a bit of a wimp. Jesus was no wimp. Jesus was an alpha, Jesus was a genuine alpha. He led people. He was a leader, an alpha. And they make him out like he's some wimp and then replace him with Santa Claus, who's basically China. Basically Amazon delivery. Enslaving small people to make toys. That's China. That's what China do. And then Amazon deliver it. Amazon are like the reindeer. So this is my Christmas special, and I hope you're enjoying it. But yeah, the royal family, everything. It's all Roman god. Christmas, Roman. We live in a Roman Empire still. And that's why I'm against Christmas, Not to mention how it makes you spend loads of money. But we're going to talk about more in part 2. So please join me for part 2 and like and subscribe to the channel. And yes, this is all negative. But it's good negative. There's no knowledge that is negative. So just remember that. Peace out. So on today's little short, we're going to do a little story about the man who tried to cancel Christmas and succeeded historically. Before America was even conceived, Christmas was almost cancelled from the West entirely. Oliver Cromwell was a guy who was a Puritan in religion, and the Puritans believed that if something was not written in the Bible, then it was corrupt. And Charles I was the king, and the Puritans rebelled against the royal family and claimed that they were false because there was nothing in the Bible to substantiate the royal family actually having a claim to being divine and having the right to rule. So they rebelled against them, and they took them out in the Civil War, and that is where they abolished Christmas. So the Puritans got rid of the royal family because they didn't believe they had a divine right to rule. But the question is, why did they get rid of Christmas as well? Well, what happened is the Puritans believed that Christmas was never substantiated in the Bible. There's no evidence in the Bible that says Jesus was born in December. So therefore, they see that this holiday is corrupt. They believe that Christmas is a false holiday. That's why they cancelled Christmas. And the Puritan movement died off, and the monarchy took back over with Charles II, and Oliver Cromwell died. But if this had never happened, and England had stayed a republic, then Christmas may have never been celebrated. Christmas may have been totally cancelled, or we may have never celebrated to this day.